Thank you for that very warm introduction. As was introduced, I have been a marketing professional now for a number of years. And what I want to run through today is really kind of a collection of that experience in a sense, and how we need to apply ourselves as marketing professionals in both today and for the path ahead. My current role is marketing director at Marketo. Who here knows Marketo? Who knows that company already? About half of you? Great. So at Marketo, I have possibly the best job I've had ever, because as a marketing professional myself, I get to work every day with other marketers and effectively just help them win, right? Help them do the things that we all need to do inside our companies, because I'm the same as any marketer in this room. You know, it's my job to both drive the growth of the business for Marketo and also prove the impact that we're making as the marketing team and marketing professionals inside that business. Who here has seen the movie Saving Private Ryan? Probably most of you, right? And you remember that opening sequence, right, when everyone's landing on the beach. And I think sometimes as marketing professionals, you can feel a little bit like that when you enter the office. You know, if you're sitting on the MRT or you're on the bus and you're thinking about the day ahead, and then the second you walk in the door, those plans are shot to bits by some latest, you know, mandate from the boss or some latest fire drill, right, that we all have to cope with. And because of that, I think that there's never been a more important time to, have we got slides? That would be awesome. There they are. I didn't realize you couldn't see them. The next one. Am I not controlling it? Okay, good. There's never been a more apt time than to really remember the words of Charles Darwin, who said it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change, right? The ones most responsive to change. And so that's why today I want to run through with you why we need to stop marketing and start engaging. And what I consider to be the 5 rules, if you like, the 5 core pillars of how we make that transition. The first rule, and you'll have books, I know, that cover some of this to take with you, so I wanted to make sure I gave you some tangible value to take away from the session. But I'm going to cover some of what's in those books, but some not so much. The first one is what I call unlearning. Okay? Let me ask you all a question. A show of hands, who here woke up this morning wanting to be marketed to? Exactly. So, and we're marketing professionals, right? And so we get this. And conceptually, we understand this. And if you're like me, when you woke up this morning, one of the very first things you did was open up your inbox and start deleting emails that you know you're never going to read that are completely irrelevant to you, right? And I think we all understand that experience. And it's just one small example why as marketers, we're still caught in disrupt mode. You know, that's that old world thinking. We're still caught in a world that's about disrupting our customers' day, okay? And that's why we need to unlearn those old rules. Who here studied marketing at university? Yeah, a number of you. And, you know, probably 2, 3, 4-year full-time course, that kind of thing. I remember the same experience. And I think back to some of the things that we were taught at university and how they just don't apply anymore today. I remember when I was at university being taught that one of the core fundamental roles of the marketer was to design the brand of the company, to craft its values, to come up with a set of principles, if you like, and all the things that a brand requires and tell the customer what it is, all right? And there was a time when that was true, when back in the good old days, if you like, we only had a couple of TV stations and a few radios, and you could outspend the voice of the customer and you could tell them effectively what you wanted to say. But those days are gone forever. I had the pleasure of hearing Marissa, who's the CMO of Taco Bell, recently present, and she said, your customers today own your brand. It's the opposite of what we were taught at university, and it's very true. Because today, the voice of our customers is far louder than the voice of the brand. We can't tell them what our brand is. They tell us what it is, and we need to listen to that. We need to listen to the experiences that they've had and what they're communicating back to us. So it's that unlearning that we need to go through, you know, and we need to start thinking about listening first before acting. You know, experience therefore used to be a good thing, but I think today there's certainly a case to say that experience can be holding you back because the answers that you used yesterday don't necessarily solve and often don't solve today's problems. But we take that experience with it and we keep applying it forward without stopping and thinking and unlearning. And as marketers today, we have to face a harsh reality because we're facing two fundamental laws of economics. The first is the law of supply and demand, because as marketers, we have this ever-increasing, ever-expanding array of demand drivers. But on the other side, the supply of attention is not increasing. And in fact, some research shows that it could even be diminishing. So as marketers, we're effectively in an arms race for the finite attention of our customers. And the other law that we run up against is the law of diminishing returns. Because today, we just try to get louder and louder and louder. But we can't just keep getting louder and expect to generate the same incremental increased returns, okay? We're gonna hit a wall. And when everyone is shouting, no single voice really ever stands out, right? So we have to pivot away from volume and into value. So I want to run through a quick unlearn checklist. For me, I mean, these are just a few, there'd be many more. But for me, if you think that you control your brand, I would challenge you to unlearn. If you think that you need to talk louder than your competition, I would challenge you to unlearn. If you think that a 12-month marketing plan still makes sense, I would challenge you to unlearn. Or that you control your buyer's journey. Or that you should execute first and then listen to the results. I know that change can be confronting, but you know what? I don't think that you should be fearful of it. And in fact, I think you'll end up in a far better place. And so, of course, then, if we unlearn, we need to obviously move to the next step. And for me, the second rule is then learning to learn, okay? So if the first pillar of success is being able to stop, to reconsider, to unlearn experience, and to reconsider how you apply success today, now we need to think about how do we now go and learn, right? What do we replace that with? There's a few key areas in this, but the first one I want to touch on is emotion. Emotional engagement, and I see this in many examples out there today, but emotional engagement can be the cornerstone of differentiation for your brand. I'm not sure about you and what drove you to become a marketing professional in the first place, but for me it was a love of science actually. It's one of the things that got me into this profession to start with, but more specifically human sciences and psychology and understanding better why people do the things that they do. Look, one of my first jobs out of school was actually at this shop. And at this shop, I sold t-shirts and board shorts and that kind of gear, right? And it's interesting because people would come in and they would buy our gear, but right next door was a shop that sold pretty much equivalent kinds of items, but for about half the cost. And that sparked a question for me. What was going on? Why were people making that decision to come to this store and spend more money versus the option right next door? And that's why when I came across the work of Antonio Damasio, who you may or may not have heard of, he's a Portuguese-American neuroscientist, and his work made a big impact. In the late 1990s, he was working with people who had suffered some damage to that part of the brain that generates emotion. Okay, everything else completely normal, but just that damage to that part of the brain. And through working with groups of people, he found that they all had one thing in common. They struggled to make any real kind of decision. They could describe what they should be doing in logical terms, but found it very, very difficult to arrive at that final decision point. So if you think about your day, a lot of decisions we make every day have pros and cons on both sides. Should I have chicken or turkey for lunch, for example? Okay, and without an emotional base to tap into to make that decision, they could talk for hours about that decision but never arrive at an outcome. And it showed for the first time that emotion is a critical driver for decision makings for consumers and business-to-business buyers as well. And so what does that mean for us marketers, right? Well, it means that emotional connection can be a weapon of mass influence, if you like, if we are able to deploy it. And we have to be then, the question is how, and we have to be thinking about how we build reciprocity. Thinking about, are we always asking but never giving? Are we providing value back the other way? Are we always disrupting, or are we actually enabling our customers' day? Okay, and so the question, of course, then is, how do we do it? So let me walk you through a quick example. This is a chart of my walk to work every day, okay? So the purple dot behind this chair is where I get off the bus, and the Marketo office is just up there on the far side. And in between, there's 16 red dots, and they're all coffee shops. So I'm not sure if you're like me, but I have to have a coffee before I get into the office, okay? But now there's 16 roughly equivalent options there, but every day I always go to the same one, every day. Now, why do I do that? Well, it's because when I walk in the door, I'm greeted with a warm, good morning, Chris, and you know what? The best thing ever, I don't even have to ask for what I want. They just start making it, okay? This is me with Julie. She's really awesome, I must say. She actually sparks up my day as well, right? So, look, a new shop could open up next door, they could put up their price, but it wouldn't really matter because I'm emotionally connected, right, to that particular service provider. And you know what? We all know this. In a small business sense, that emotional connection has always really been a cornerstone, right? But for marketers in this room, the challenge has been, how do we do that? How do we take that and do it at scale? How do we do it for 100 customers? How do we do it for 10,000 customers, okay? That's always been the challenge for us marketers. And so really without the technology, if you like, to be able to do that, we've done what I call hope marketing, okay? Hope marketing is when you guess effectively what your customers want. When you sit in a room, back in your office, come up with a campaign that you hope might work, because you don't really know each individual customer personally, right? So you have to do mass segments. You have to hope at and guess at what's going to appeal to a mass segment. So let me run you through a quick example. This is for Singapore. So this year, we will spend $1.95 billion on advertising in Singapore. Okay, and so the question, of course, then is, what's the result of all that investment? Well, an AdNews survey showed that 62% of customers couldn't recall one single ad that they'd seen for the last 12 months when asked. Not a positive one or a negative one. And sometimes the ones you really hate, actually the ones that stick the most, right? And so if you follow that logic forward, you'd say that therefore 1.3 billion roughly was spent on very little tangible outcome, okay? And that's the reality if we keep hoping. The good news, though, is that customers want us to change. In fact, they're desperate for us. So 89% of business buyers and 72% of consumers say that they want us to learn them as individuals, to connect with them as individuals, and to engage with them. Okay, so if we step back to the unlearn premise for a sec, when we're talking about unlearn, this is basically the process we went through. We'd do mass markets, we'd do mass research, and then we'd execute, right, out to mass segments. But in the unlearn and then the relearn and learn to earn frame, we do the reverse. What we do first is listen before acting. We listen to the buyers, we listen to their behaviors, and then we engage in what I call markets of one. So, that's great. Tell me more, right? Got it, but how do we do that? Okay, how do we take that step? How do we really go and go out to do that? So for me, the key is that, sorry, I think I've lost something there, AV team. The thing that we need to do first, of course, is we need to learn to listen first before we act, okay? Listen to actual behavior, because 6% of marketers tell us that they don't have an ability to do that, right? They don't have an ability to see their customers from every different angle. So the first thing you need to do when you get back to your office is think about all the different touch points you have, and what I would call a listening audit. Firstly, just figure out where you are today. Where can I pull together information from? Where can't I? Where do pockets of information exist that we don't currently see? Figure out where you're starting from so that you can put a plan in place to improve it. Because no one, I guarantee no one in this room has a 360-degree view of their customers. Right? It's very unlikely. But figure out where you're starting from so you can put in place a path to improve it. Because without doing that, you won't be able to get to a stage where you can engage with those customers that you have. And then the second driver, if you like, is behavior. So it's behavior-based marketing rather than hope-based marketing, to make that distinction. To describe this, I want to go through an example with you. So I've chosen very deliberately the Singapore Lions as my example for this one. So let's imagine for a second, instead of the roles that you currently have, you're the marketing manager for this football team. And it's your job to sell tickets to each game, okay? How are you going to respond to that challenge? How are you going to do it? In the past, if we employed hope marketing, if we were coming at it from sitting in our boardrooms and coming up with something effectively, we would have seen the stadium as a generic experience. We would have thought about, we would have picked a couple of generic experiences about going to that match, and then we would have deployed those benefits to the whole market, and we would have hoped to get a good return. But what if we switch that? What if we go the other way? So let's walk through an example now of how we might do behavior-based engagement instead. So instead of putting the product at the center of what we do, let's put the customer at the center. And let's start actually with the customer, because that's really the difference, right? Hope marketing starts with what you're selling. Behavior-based marketing starts with what the customer wants. So let's look, listen, and learn about this particular, very passionate, as you can see, football supporter. Firstly, let's have a listen to what they're talking about on social media, for example. Which players are they talking about? Which players do they really like? Which ones don't they like, which is just as important to understand? Are they talking about other things, other experiences that they have when they go to the football, food and beverage, how they're getting there, who they're going with? Okay, so let's listen. Okay, right, we've identified something. We've seen we've got some data now, right? So let's think, okay, so we understand now who this the favorite player of this person is. How are we going to connect that together? Right, now let's look across and let's look at buying data. Let's pull that across. And let's look at where in the past this person has come to a game, all right? And we find, oh, actually they've come on Fridays and importantly, they buy 4 adult tickets. So that tells us they're not coming as a family, right? So this is not a family outing, this is going to be a social outing, okay? So with the combination of these sorts of data points, right, and there's many different kinds of data points you could pull into this, you can now deploy out to every channel behavior-based engagement that's based on what that individual wants from the game, not the generic hope marketing message that we might go to market with in a mass segmentation sense. The Detroit Pistons are a customer of Marketo, and they did just what I described. And the results are there to speak for themselves. But the principles don't just apply to sport, of course. They apply to every industry, really. Insurance, education, manufacturing. Okay? The principles apply to everything. It's just making the switch and changing the starting point, which is going to be the driver for us to move forward. Right. Now I'm going to take a very different tack, because what we've talked about in the first 2 rules are about how we engage with our external customers. The third rule is about how we engage with our internal ones, because I believe we have to overturn the way that we're currently engaging. I think it's really critically important. Who here has been at this meeting? Everyone? Yeah, I mean, I have, right? I think as marketing professionals, we've all been at this meeting. And, we have to, with no way of really reporting value, with reporting financial outcomes, it's a very difficult position to be in, okay? And the reality is that research shows us that 80% of CEOs say they don't trust the CMO, okay? 91% do trust the CFO, however. Now, why is that? And for me, it points to the fact that the CFO and the CEO, they speak the same language. But as marketers, we need to learn from that, okay? And to be fair, I mean, 90% of us haven't actually been trained in writing business cases, putting ROI cases together, and doing some of the things that we need to do to describe return on investment. And because of that, we're seeing these sorts of trends go on. I mean, I see lots of reports like this. I'm sure you do too when you read publications like Mumbrella. So there's a lot of pressure on the CMO suite right now. In fact, it's the shortest tenure of the C-suite across the board. And actually, it's getting worse. It's going down, not up. And there's no doubt a few different parts to this. But what I want to focus in on today is what I call engine room metrics, okay? Engine room metrics are all the things that we've no doubt talked a lot about at this conference in a lot of different other sessions. It's impressions, it's click-through rates, it's the feeds and speeds type information, which is critical to running this marketing engine, right? But the CEO, to be fair, doesn't care, okay? The CEO doesn't want to know if this dial is on 90 or 91 degrees, right? The CEO wants to know where is the engine taking them, right? It doesn't want to know how it's working. Are you taking me to my goal? Are you taking me to Revenue Island, for example? Okay? Just a quick poll. Who here does have the ability today to walk in a very short time frame and say, here is the marketing generated revenue that I've contributed to my company this year? Yeah, a couple, yeah. What about pipeline? So if you've got revenue, you'd have pipeline, customer lifetime value, okay? These are some of the metrics that we have to switch to. We have to switch away from engine room metrics. We have to leave engine room metrics in the engine room. It's critically important, okay? What about this pivot? For those of you that can that can report the pipeline you have produced, can you also forecast the pipeline you will produce the other way? Because that's the pivot that actually changes things. So if you think about the way a CFO works, they've got a rolling 12-month plan, okay? They're constantly predicting forward. As marketers, we've been very challenged to even show the past, let alone the forward. So these are the incremental steps that we can make as marketers to make a massive impact within our businesses, to get the information that we need to be able to have a seat at the boardroom table and speak the same language as the other participants in that conversation. Okay, rule number 4. Okay, so we've done unlearn, learn to earn. We've overturned, don't want to be too revolutionary, but we have. Now we're going to talk about agility and the role of agility. And I want to cover off a couple of different parts of this. The first is the technology side. There's no doubt in my mind that technology is critical for marketers and the way that we select and choose to invest in technology, critical to our ability just to be agile. You've all seen the MarTech slide. 2011, it was 150. Today, it's more than 5,000 MarTech ad tech solutions out there. And as marketers, I know it too. There's an overwhelming choice. There's an overwhelmingly complex landscape to navigate. And that can be an anchor to your ability to be agile. Research shows that 25% of us, 25%, a quarter of the people in this room are using more than 20 tools, and none of which actually talk to each other inside their organization. So we talk about attribution and the challenges of attribution. I mean, there's a fundamental driver here, right? And 53% of marketers surveyed complained of too many technologies and all that integration challenge that comes with it. So as marketing professionals, and this is a quote from Ansel, who are a client of ours, Mitchell, who's great, he loves to say, we have to avoid pointless point solutions, okay? We have to figure out a way to be agile. Otherwise, we end up with a blank slide that actually should have had pictures on it, but doesn't. So, here it is. So what we end up with is this. Different parts of our business having different views of the customer, none of which are right, okay? And this is when we go back to the need to come together, to do that listening audit, to figure out where your information sources are. What you need to work towards, this is the result of not having an integrated engagement platform to hold everything together and to give you that single insight, that single view of your customer. You need to be working towards funneling in all that information into a central repository, a central brain, if you like, that can sit at the center of your marketing team so that you can get the actual view of the customer. Because without that, you're not going to be able to engage. You're not going to be able to be personal and authentic at scale and have that emotional engagement that we're all striving for. A digital brain that sits at the center of the team, for me, is a critical technology imperative for marketers. Okay? It's what's going to drive agility. The second part of the agility question for me is the team. Who here, a couple of quick questions. Who here has heard of the Agile Marketing Framework? I say Agile Marketing, not Agile Software. Yep, Agile Development. Yeah, a couple. So there's a number of companies now who are taking the principles of Agile Development, the principles, not so much of the very structured process, but the principles of Agile, and applying it into their marketing teams and changing their marketing organizations to be Agile and to follow those same principles. No doubt most of you, if you're an enterprise or mid-sized sort of company and you're in this room, you still have a hierarchical kind of a structure. And that'd be very common across the board. The problem though, that in this sort of a structure, all your teams are aligned to individual communications channels. If we think back to some of the previous rules, how are you going to integrate information? How are you going to get a single view of the customer when the marketing teams all focus themselves in individual little channel silos? Okay? Some of the companies that have adapted, some of the companies that haven't. Okay? Netflix, Spotify, Apple. There's a great example for Spotify, actually. I suggest you go and Google it, on how Spotify have applied the principles of Agile into their marketing team and into the way that their whole system operates. So Agile marketing today, how do we think about applying it? How do we think about getting away from hierarchies and into Agile? For me, I think about the marketing team now more like a surgical team. So before you've had your marketing managers all in these sort of channel silos, but what you want is you want everyone to come together and bring their individual experience and expertise together, but to be focused on one specific short-term objective. And it's that sprint mentality that's coming into the marketing. It's around Agile squads is what they're called. These teams are not making 12-month plans, right? Because if you think about that difference, it's not about hope marketing where you're coming up with a program that you hope will work. If you start with the customer, it's about what they need today, and it's about experimenting and behavior-based engagement. The way that you go about your technology decision-making is ultimately either going to make you unable to be agile, be a weight to agility, if you like, or it's going to give you the speed and agility that you need to win today. And the need to be agile in the marketing team, both on the technology side and the marketing team structure side, for me is imperative. All right, last rule, we're almost there, and the need to go fast. And I think we all feel that sense of pace accelerating, which is why I love this quote from Gordon Moore from Intel. And the irony is that this is from 1965, okay? So, I mean, he was way ahead of his time when he spoke these words. Because I don't think that there's ever been a more apt time, and then probably, that will continue forever, to really take these sort of words in. Look, we all know, it's been said many times before, that our customer expectations are changing because our customers are being influenced by the experience they're having with the Amazons and the Ubers of the world, and then they expect all of you and me and us to deliver exactly that same thing. The expectations that they're seeing from other companies are coming down onto us. And while they're expecting it today, no doubt they're going to be demanding it from us very soon. So we all face a choice. We need to start changing to meet the new expectations of the customers, or we can choose to pretty much ignore everything I've said today, go back to the office and carry on. All right, we can pretty much make a choice one way or the other. What's interesting for me, though, is when we think about the important people within our business, that PwC survey found that 90% of our CEOs across the world saw changing customer expectations as the #1 challenge facing their business. Now, if you think about everything a CEO has to deal with, I mean, that's pretty compelling. So our business leaders are seeing this. It's not just the marketing team. The business leaders are seeing it too. And the good news is that as marketers, there's research to show that we're all starting to get this message. 81% of us are saying we need to change our structure and design of marketing organizations to meet the needs of our business over the next 3-5 years. It's just a matter of getting started. That's why as marketing professionals, we have to unlearn the past. We have to learn how to earn our customers with a technology brain at the center of our teams and an agility to be markets of one focused and behavior-based. That's how we're going to engage with lethal effectiveness. At Marketo, we call this the engagement economy, where everything and everyone is connected. And I'd like to encourage you to grab a copy of a book that we have out. That's my email address. Just shoot me an email and say, Chris, send me the book, and I'll flick you a copy. So there's a lot more reading in there on some of the principles that we've covered today, and some of the information that's in the booklets are in here as well. One quick plug. I'm sure many in this room recognize me because I was that annoying guy that came over and asked for a business card for this. So please come over to the Marketo stand. It's just across the hallway. We're giving away a Google Home tomorrow at lunchtime. You may be the lucky winner. And Google will know a lot more about you than it already does, though it probably knows a lot anyway, right? So I want to thank you. These are my details. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, go for it. It's been great to be with you. Thank you for sharing this time. I believe we're now going to have a quick informal chat. So come up with some questions. Please make them nice. I'm sure they'll be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Please take this
over here.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gents. It's time to press the reset button and think exactly what you're doing out there. And now is your chance to engage in questions with Chris and find out exactly how you can change your business. But before we do so, before we move to audience Q&A, I would just like to ask you one question myself, if I may abuse my,
Go for it.
my chairmanship of this session. So really interesting presentation, and obviously you highlighted certain companies that are doing some of these 5 things that you've listed. Is there one company out there or a number of companies out there that have already pressed the reset button and are doing this?
Yeah, I think when I approached it, it was more as marketing professionals than it was companies in that sense. So the framework, what I think it's really important, I mean, look, I've been in marketing for 17 years now, and so trust me, I get it. Every pain that you have today and yesterday and tomorrow, I have as well, okay? So I fully understand that. What I tried to do is more think about what are the critical things that as marketers we need to take forward with us, the ways of thinking that are going to allow us to be agile, to connect with customers, and to do those sorts of things. So as marketing professionals, it's actually up to us as individuals to drive the kinds of outcomes that you're referring to in the other companies that we work for. I mean, Marketo has a significant number of clients that we work for, including Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Amazon, at the top end of the town, but all the way down to smaller businesses and many agencies as well. So we have a variety of different clients that use our engagement platform to do that behavior-based engagement, that markets of one engagement, which is which is fundamentally different. Sure, technology sits at the heart of it, but it's the concept of using the technology in a fundamentally different way, because it's not about the marketer trying to guess what will work. It's using the technology to tell you what will work, because it's about what the individual wants, not about the product that you're trying to sell in a very generic way.
So it's about becoming more intuitive.
It's like diametrically opposed almost. And look, I grew up, in advertising myself, and I know I've been in those meetings where you come up with a value proposition, you come up with your best creative you could, but ultimately you were hoping it would work. I mean, there was no empirical evidence any of that work would actually drive an outcome. With markets of one behavior-based, what you're doing is you're actually listening and learning first, so that you can experiment. You can experiment in very small ways. So it's not like launching a TVC where a couple of $1 million gets sunk regardless of whether there's an outcome. Now, a few $100s here and there, you can test concepts very quickly. Does it work? And then roll out the ones that will work. So in that agile marketing sense, those teams are not about 12-month marketing plans. What those teams are about is deploying very quick, very small tests constantly, every week. New tests, experimentations, and then rolling and running with the ones that actually get traction, actually get impact. And with attribution, and I'll go back to the keynote that we had this morning, where we were talking about the publishing media world and some of the pain points that were very evident across that panel. I was sitting there thinking, attribution is the answer, I might be able to help you with that. So for marketers, attribution is key, and it's about that engagement with your internal audience as much as then the external audience, which as marketing professionals, let's face it, is going to drive our own personal careers.
Excellent. Okay, let's move to the audience questions now. Who would like to go first? Please do raise your hand. And please, when the microphone gets to you, please do announce where you're from and your name so we know who we're talking to.
Hello, Chris. Tim
Hey.
from Umbrella.
We've met.
Our paths have indeed crossed. I'm interested by the fact that your background as a marketer, you've come through the advertising
Yep.
world as well. I wonder what your views are on what the skill sets of the future marketer are, what path they should actually take in order to succeed
Yeah.
by the time they sit in that marketing
Yeah.
hot seat.
Yeah, and I think I touched on, to start the question, I touched on, the fact that, are there any anyone from a university in here? No? So I've spoken with other tertiary education providers, and they struggle, to provide courses that can equip a marketer to be successful today. And when I think back, and I touched on that need to unlearn some of what we were taught, because it just doesn't fundamentally apply anymore. So there's definitely challenges with how we can educate. And look, coming to a conference like this is obviously how we replace that. We come to these conferences to learn what's going on, what's working, and apply and take from these conferences back to the office things that we can apply. And that's what I came here for, as much as to share my experience. So for me, what I tried to cover just in the last 30 minutes was more fun, like principles in a sense. Things that if you can apply, if you can go back and being very conscious about not assuming too much, not taking what worked last year and just automatically applying it forward, I think that will certainly put you in good stead. But I would come back to attribution, because as marketing professionals, you see some of the data, you see some of the pressure on CMOs and marketers across the board. If we don't change how we engage internally, we are not going to be able to get out of that budget squeeze. Who here disagrees with this? Whenever your business gets in trouble, the first thing that gets cut is the marketing budget. Okay? Now, why is that? Because we can't attribute value. Okay? And so then there's another, that is the reality. We have to be able to get out of that. And attribution, Marketo, for example, at the center of your marketing team that can tie your campaigns together and show you exactly whether you got value from them or not. It would solve some of the challenges we heard this morning at the keynote, but also your own professional careers. It will drive your perception within your organizations.
Okay, who would like to go next? Any further questions? Lady at the front here.
You got the good seat, I remember. Yeah.
Hi, I'll just go from the speaker. Hi, I'm Claire from
Hi.
Ogilvy. So I work in an agency,
Yeah.
and we've tried agile marketing, but I find that a lot of their brands and even fellow agencies
Yeah.
are very hesitant to do so because it does involve short spurts, right? Short chapter making.
Yeah.
So and then you see the attribution. If it doesn't work, you kill it almost immediately. But with attribution, there's first click and last click. So for instance, in the middle, if there's a video, it got no views, we killed it,
Yeah.
and then we're surprised the next month when our sales dropped. But actually, even if it's not any videos, it actually got the results that we
Yeah.
kind of wanted but couldn't see.
Yeah, so at Marketo we do first touch and multi-touch for exactly that challenge. Because if you only do first touch, you only get one slice of the truth. So I would suggest looking at the multi-touch and first touch attribution and thinking about ultimately what the objectives are and tying them closely in. But you have to be able to think about, can I measure it first, obviously, then before you implement.
Okay.
Hi.
Gentleman at the front here.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Pete here from Control Shift. So I thank you for your talk. I 100% agree with your approach. I think a lot of the marketing tech or ad tech companies are all approaching it from different angles. And in terms from a marketing basis, I think a lot of the digital first companies get it. So a lot of the clients you talked
You're right.
about were the Amazons and the Googles and stuff like that, right? However, the challenge being a ad tech or martech player is really helping the big brands, right? the Unilevers of the world, the P&Gs of the world, the Walmarts of the world, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, talking to all these marketers, I think a lot of them realize the challenge that they have, and they don't know where to start, right?
Yeah.
They don't have a CRM, they don't know who their customer is, they're taking stabs at segment targeting
Yeah.
in media,
Yeah.
but they don't know where to start, right?
Yeah.
So just wanted your insights into how
Yeah,
you get them.
so
there.
I think I'd touch on a couple of things. First is what I would call a listening audit. Just go, you have to baseline where you're starting from. So go and look at where does information currently come from? How siloed am I? Am I running, just in the marketing team, 15, 20 different isolated MarTech or AdTech solutions in different channels, none of which can come together and give you any kind of consolidated insight. So kind of do that audit if you like. So start from there, and then you can, without that, you have to then start a roadmap to fix the issue. So once you can identify the challenge, you've got to drive it, and you need to drive it in the organization. So, I like that phrase from Gandhi, who said, be the change you want to see in the world. So, take the challenge, because ultimately, if you don't do it, who will? So I would say lead it forward, start with an audit, figure out where you're starting from, and then work with people that can get you through those next phases to build up your capability to be able to do that engagement. Because once you can get that attribution layer fixed, that when the business sees you in a much more credible sense and us as much more credible business people, that changes the game. And then you don't have that constant, grabbing of marketing budget because it's perceived as, where's the value?
Okay. I think we're almost out of time. Just one more quick question.
If you
if
have
we
other
can be
questions,
brief.
I am at the stand all afternoon, so
Yep.
just come and chat. We're just across the hall.
Hey, Chris.
Hey.
I didn't get a chance to listen to you completely. Was in a boring session and thought I'd just jump by. And I guess
I love you. I love your honesty.
Because I
love your
missed
honesty.
most of it.
Refreshing.
Do you think Marketo could be an overkill for a startup?
Well, a lot of assumptions I'd have to put into answering a question like that, but it depends what you mean by overkill, because at the end of the day, it depends how much, are you spending money on marketing or not, and then do you want to know if it worked or not? For me, I'm a demand gen revenue marketer. That's been my career, more so than on the brand side, if you like. Some people come from a brand side marketer kind of career path. So for me, it's always about attribution, about being able to see outcomes. So unless, depending on your circumstance, for right now, you might be in a unique situation. You might be very, very small, but every startup I've met wants to be big one day. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Well, great session.
All right, thank you.
Great questions.
Thanks, everyone.